Welcome to the very last New Media Visionaries guest speaker lecture series.
The best for last.
Yeah, we saved the best for last. Okay. Tonight's speaker is Senior Computer Scientist Tim Wiegman at Adobe, and he is going to share some of the projects that he's worked on at various companies.
And what I do at Adobe.
And what he does at Adobe.
Okay. Hello, everybody. When Camille asked me to do this talk, she asked me to talk about what I've done in the past, and I said, "Oh, I guess I can do that." And then she told me that she told me the date, and I said, "Tuesday night? That's movie night. I don't know if I can do it. It's movie night." But I thought, okay, for you, I'll skip movie night. But that might have an effect on my talk tonight. So. And she asked me to talk about what I've done in the past. And also, she told me this was about the title of your group talk was Silicon Valley Visionaries. And then I looked on the web and it said it was New Media Visionaries. And Camille's response was, "Oh, that's because those guys got it wrong." And I thought, okay, well, I'll stick with Silicon Valley Visionaries because I'm not going to do it over. But I thought I'd talk about a few things that I did before I actually worked in Silicon Valley. So those are the previews. These previews have been approved for all audiences. So now, does everyone know what this thing is? Well, it says what it is up there. So this is the slide rule. This is something I used in high school. In high school, in chemistry classes and things like that, we had to use this. We didn't even have calculators, let alone computers. And you can be my runner or something. You can pass this out so people can look at it. But I had that. And then, let's see if this is working now. Then one year in high school, I noticed that there was this kit you could buy. I was into trying to build things. And it's a Heath kit. And this is a calculator. This isn't mine. It's a picture of one, but the same kind I bought and constructed. And I started using that instead of the slide rule. But it wasn't very useful. It has plus, times, minus, and it cost something like $100, I think, for just doing 4 functions, things that you could do in your head. And when I was looking at this, I saw this D key. Does anyone know what that D key stands for? You probably know what the C and the CE stands for, clear. No one knows? Well, I had to look it up. Fortunately, Google has answers. The D stands for display. What happens is this thing was trying to save power, so you would be using it, and all of a sudden the display up there would go off to save battery power. You have to press D again to get it to go back on. But it's kind of a strange thing. And then when I was in college, I bought a kit and built this, which is been termed the first personal computer kit. And when I bought it, the only way you could get things on it when I first got it was to toggle those switches on the front. And there was a sheet of numbers you had to put in, and you would toggle those in. That was called bootstrapping. And then you could plug in a cassette drive, and you could buy a cassette that already had data on it, and you could read that in. And I thought, this is crazy. So I went and bought a floppy drive, which was the 5.5-inch floppy drives, if anyone's seen those. You've probably seen the little small 3.5-inch hard floppies. Well, this is a bigger one. And I modified the software. I looked through the code and figured out where it was, modified the software, and then made it so that I could save things onto the floppy drive. And I was writing programs and added a save command, a load, and delete, I think, just like 3 commands. And then I called up the company and said, "Hey, I made this better. Do you want to buy this? I mean, would you like to have it back?" They said, "No, that's okay. We got this version from this guy named Bill Gates, and he's going to give us a newer version." And I thought, okay, whoever that guy is. That's sort of, at that time, it's like, whoever that guy is. And the computer I built, I gave to a guy at one of the companies I'm going to mention later. And then he actually gave it to the Computer History Museum. So the computer I built is in the Computer History Museum in Mountain View. So I haven't visited it. makes me want to cry, and then these are punch cards. Some people are saying, what the heck are these things? This is what punch cards look like. I need these for a little while, so just to explain what these. And the way these things worked is there was a device that was sort of like a typewriter, but it was a desk and a typewriter. The thing was so big. And it had a whole bunch of these that were blank in it. And then each one, you could type an instruction on there. I don't know if any of you have taken computer classes, but in a computer class, you have one line for each instruction in a file right now. Well, this one, you would have one line on each card, and you would type it in, and it would punch. I don't know if you could see, but there's holes in there. It would punch holes in there and also put the words at the top, just so you remember what was going on with your program. And then you would put it into a special reader, and it would go and read each of those cards. You probably, in really old science fiction, you might have seen them furiously reading through like it was something important. It'd read it into the computer, execute the program, and then print it out on these big sheets of paper. And then you would repeat that cycle if you had a bug in your program, if it didn't work. And I worked in this lab, and some guy came up to me, and he said, this isn't working right. He showed me the printout. It's not, there's something wrong. And I said, oh, you're missing an instruction. So I took a piece of paper, and I tore it like this. I said, I just had some random piece of paper, took it like this. I said, you need this. And I wrote it on this thing. And I said, this is what you need to add in there. And I gave it to him. And the guy, he went away. And he came back really quickly and said, but where's it go? And I said, okay. And I went through like this, and I said, right after this instruction, it goes right here like this. I said, so you need to go punch up a card and put it in there. Gave it to him, and it seemed like he was happy. Then I went back to doing my own thing at the computer lab, and there was, then all of a sudden, this light, they have a whole bunch of lights that give status. This says lights flashing. Card reader jam. So I go over and look in the card reader, and this guy had taken that piece of paper, stuck it in there exactly like that, and stuck it in the thing, and it read through until it got to that piece of paper, and of course it jammed just like in a printer, and I had to take it out, and I thought, that guy is the dumbest guy I'd ever met. But, so, if people want to see what they look like, they can. So, that was a really early form of doing things. So now on to our feature presentation. Back to the movie theme. And the talk is on Silicon Valley visionaries. Now, this is probably what you expect when you think of visionaries. I don't know if you recognize all these guys. We'll have a quiz later, see if you know all of them. You probably recognize the guy in the lower left-hand corner. If you don't, and maybe some of the other ones. And the guy in the middle, the guy who's hiding there. You should recognize him. Does anyone know who that guy who's like second from the bottom to the right, above Larry Ellison? He's the guy who Elon Musk, who started Tesla, and so anyway. But anyway, that's what you expected. But this is what you're going to get, just me. And that's, if you can't, it's still kind of fuzzy like me, but so at least I'm a guy who's willing to work for the Silicon Valley visionaries for food. That's what I've been doing. So I'm not a visionary, but I've certainly worked for them. So this is going to be kind of a. So does anyone know who these guys are? I bet some of you guys back there. Does anyone else know who these guys are? Okay, this is Hewlett. This is Hewlett and Packard. Actually, the order is Packard and Hewlett. And that's the first place I worked in 1980. The dates up there is just when I started working at the companies. So that's when I started working at HP. And when I was working there, I worked on one of these, which is not much more advanced than the other thing. But this is a data terminal. It's not a computer. All it can do is take stuff from that keyboard that you type in and then send it off to some big computer that was in some other room or some other location. And this one was sort of advanced because it had those little soft keys at the bottom, function keys, which are common to keyboards now. But it sort of started with things like this, which is why they kept being on keyboards. And one thing that was kind of cool about this job is that at that time, these terminals were actually built in Sunnyvale, or Cupertino and Sunnyvale, and they had a program where it's a build your own whatever program, whichever group you're in, and they after you'd sign up for it, after a while they would say, here's a keyboard, and the keyboard would have a chip out of the corner because the quality control would say this is not good enough. So eventually, over time, I had one of these completely where it was fully functional, and you would just collect the pieces, and if you looked in anyone's office, software, hardware guys, they'd have a pile of stuff in the corner. And sometimes it was the thing of like, well, if you could get 2 keyboards and trade for someone else. But it was kind of cool that they were so manufactured, and that was a interesting thing we could do. Does anyone know who this guy is? Probably not very many people do. But this is John Ellenby, and he started this company called Grid. I don't know if anyone's heard of Grid before. I started there in 1981. Did you? Well, did you bring it tonight so I could? An anchor or well, the first thing I'm going to show you is a better anchor. So back then, there was another company that claimed to be a portable computer. This was the Osborne. It was called the Osborne 1. You might not be able to tell from the scale there, but I looked it up, and this thing's 24 pounds, and it's about this big, this wide, because those are 5-inch floppy drives, so it's probably about 15 or 16 inches wide, and that big. So that was their idea of a portable computer. It's like, wow, you love this thing. And it actually didn't even run, there was no such thing as Windows. It didn't even have MS-DOS. It ran CPM. I think it's the correct name for that. But this was more the idea of a portable computer. And this is the Grid Compass, the first one that they made. But it was really expensive. Maybe you got it at a discount or something. Oh, did she? Who's that? Okay. No? Okay, I think that's after probably after, well, you can match up the dates and see if I think it's after I left. But based on Google, it was like more than $9,000, but it had some things that this casing, it's not plastic, it's titanium metal, and that's something like when when this laptop came out, the fact that this was made with aluminum metal was a big deal, but someone had done it 30 years ago, so it's just like a lot of it has to do with timing. It's a plasma display. They didn't have LCD or LED displays at the time. Excuse me. And so what they found out is that the people who could afford this was mostly the government, because the government, I guess, they have what's the term? But their pockets go forever. Or whatever. There's some term for it. But when they were selling these things, there was a sales force in Washington, D.C., and they were trying to get them to buy these. And they said, well, it has to be Tempest approved. And they said, well, what's that? And they said, well, we can't tell you. And they said, what do you mean you can't tell us? And they said, because it's a secret, because we don't want people to know. And they said, well, then how are we supposed to do it? And they said, well, basically, they described it in general terms. And this story is probably, when it was told to me after looking on Google, it seems like the concept of Tempest is not a secret. That just means that someone who's in the next room can't figure out what you're doing. Because with a laptop like this, or especially a PC configuration where there's separate pieces, if someone's in the next room and you're in one hotel room, someone's in the next room, and they have the right equipment, they can tell exactly what you're typing through the display and through the keyboard, and there's like 5 different ways they could do it that was described. And so the idea was to shield all this stuff. And I said, well, how do we know we're doing it properly? They said, well, you'll have to send us a unit and we'll tell you. So they went through this cycle, and eventually they, the screen had a really fine mesh if you looked at it really closely, you could see little wires, and they added shielding inside, but it was already a metal case. And eventually, they were able to sell it, and that's probably their best sales were through to the government. But at one point, they said, "Well, we need to repair these things," and then Grid said, "Well, just send them in. We'll fix them for you." He said, "No, this is because they were selling these to the NSA and which is a government agency. At the time, actually, I'd heard of FBI and CIA. I hadn't heard of NSA at the time, but that's yet another more secret than CIA kind of thing." And they said, so eventually they bought all the equipment to repair the thing also. And the funniest story I heard is that some of the shipments or all the shipments they wanted, they said, "Well, where do you want us to send these things?" When they would order 10 of these computers, they said, "Oh, just drop them off at the Orange County Airport." And we said, "You mean like ship them through the Orange County Airport?" And they said, "No, just leave it by the bathrooms at the Orange County Airport, and we'll pick them up." And so, okay. So it's like, cool. And it was also used on the space shuttle. There's one, which I couldn't tell from this picture if that was supposed to be Mr. Spock. It's kind of with a bad haircut, or a picture of this guy, this astronaut. But the way they were really used is that the space shuttle, when it was orbiting, there were certain pockets or certain areas where they couldn't communicate back to the ground control. And in essence, they didn't know where they were. Of course, if you ask me, they were in space, right? I know where you are. You're up there. But so this was a duplicate of what ground control saw, where they were going. It was basically timed with what they were seeing. So whenever they were out of communication, they could say, "Well, here's where we are, and here's how far we have till we go." So it's pretty simple, but it was one of the uses of the grid computer. And then it was also, after a while, used in movies. Not after a while, but occasionally used in movies. And I only put this here because I was showing this movie to my son about 2 months ago. And it's like, hey, cool. And this is a good use for a grid compass. It was used to destroy these guys. It was used in Aliens too. So sometimes you can tell when a movie was made based on the props that are in there, based on when those products were out. And then eventually, they switched over to making pen-based computers. And you might say, "Oh, this just looks like a dumb iPad," but there were a lot of pen computers that came out before iPad. And then, does anyone know who this guy is? He looks kind of like a ninja pen guy or something. This is Jerry Kaplan, and he started this company called Go Corporation. And what they designed, put together, was a platform which consisted of a hardware reference, which hardware reference is when they say, "Well, we had a team of hardware folks who built the computer," but then they would give it to some other company and say, "Here, you can build one like this. This is what you have to do. Follow this design." And then an OS, the OS is called PenPoint. And I haven't been mentioning earlier, but most of these early jobs, I've been working on things where I've been working on the OS or porting things from one processor to another, that kind of thing. And then near the end of Go's short life, there was one other company that was making the device, which was a company called EO, and the companies merged together, and they came up with this thing. And this looks kind of like if you asked your young son, to say, "Go find some things in the house and build me a computer." and you say it has to be smaller than a couch. And so they would take a box and take a phone that they found somewhere and stick some Mickey Mouse ears on it and find an antenna from something. But that was the smallest form of communication. This was actually a AT&T device, so you can tell AT&T wasn't the right choice that year. And then, does anyone know who this guy is? Good thing it's not a real quiz, right? This is Trip Hawkins. He started a company called Electronic Arts. Probably the thing that most people know is SimCity. You've probably played SimCity before, or EA games, EA Sports, Madden football, those kind of things. He started that company, and then after that he said, well, okay, I'm bored, and he started this company called 3DO. And 3DO was a gaming company. Again, he was developing a platform, and his goal was to replace cartridges. A lot of games at this time were cartridge games, and just to have a cartridge, not counting the game itself, was pretty expensive because it had some electronics in there, the plastic, it had its own processor, things like that. And he said, well, we should be able to put all this stuff on CD-ROMs instead. And the cost difference was, approximately, but like $5 for a cartridge and 90 cents for a CD-ROM. So they cut out a lot of cost for the games, because once you sell one unit, the idea is to sell lots and lots of games. If you can make it be 1/5 the cost, then you're making 5 times the profit. And this is one of the systems was made by Panasonic, and then they also had some from done by Sanyo and Gold Star. But it was a great idea, but Nintendo and Sony were doing the same thing, and anyone who has a Sony PlayStation knows it uses CD or DVD ROMs now. So they didn't go very far. And I actually left before that to go to... Does anyone know who this guy is? Okay. And then, or like, oh, that guy. Because you probably maybe you recognize the guys inside. It's Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. And in the earlier years of Apple, the board of directors, they said to Steve Jobs, well, you're too young to run a company. You don't really know how to run a company. We need to get somebody into the company who knows how to run companies. So they hired John Scully, who was an executive at PepsiCo, or Pepsi, the company that makes Pepsi Cola. And then eventually what happened is he fired that guy, who came back later. So that's when I went to Apple, or more specifically, I was in the Newton division, I guess. So I have a Newton here, which you can, we'll pass it around, but you can imagine how many iPods or iPhones you could stick inside of a Newton. But I'll let you pass that around. And they actually made a number of these devices. The ones on the top were it was like the Newton software, but they put a keyboard on it, and it was called, I believe this was eMate. I think that's what it's called. And it was sold to schools. Cheaper version of the device. And the one thing that plagued the Newton, maybe not the only thing, but one of the things that plagued the Newton is that they were very ambitious with their handwriting, but the handwriting didn't work very well for a lot of people. And there's even a comic that came out. I don't know if you can read that, but basically he's making fun of the fact that it wasn't working. But can you read that from there? Okay. And there were well, since the next thing I'm going to talk about is Easter eggs. In a lot of software, there's something called Easter eggs. Does everyone know what Easter eggs are? More strange terms, huh? Easter eggs are when the software developers want to add in their own little thing, kind of secret thing in there. And actually, one of the versions, if you wrote in egg freckles, it would bring up that last panel of the comic. After this comic came out, in a later release, they did that. And just to mention that they also had government customers, and these guys are very apropos to what I was going to mention, is that one of the Easter eggs that was done was added to the date book. I don't know if anyone, when you're passing that around, you can actually turn it on. I mean, these are truly functional devices. You can turn it on. There's a switch on the upper left-hand corner, and then it turns it on. And also there's a pen. You can poke it down and a pen pops out, and you can write with the pen. But anyway, on the device, it's an intelligence test. Yeah. It's like oh no. But on people's iPhones now or iPod touches, if you travel somewhere, you can change your location. Say, I'm now in New York, and it changes the time for you. On here, it also has locations. And at the time, someone added in the location Area 51. And if you chose Area 51 and then went to your meetings, and someone was talking about the graphical design folks, or the design folks, whenever you had a meeting, they showed little face-to-face icons. That meant it was a meeting. And then besides the face-to-face icons, they had an icon for the location of your meeting. I don't remember what it was. But if you changed your location to Area 51, those little icons changed to aliens with antenna. And the little icon for the building changed to a spaceship. And they thought that was really cute. And again, they were showing this around. The salespeople were showing it around. And then someone from the government said, you can't do that, because that says Area 51. And they said, what's the big deal? And they said, no, sorry, that's a classified area. So they actually made them create a patch, which meant that before it was released, they had to put some additional software on top of it. And if you look in there under the areas, it says Groom Lake. Area 51 is near Groom Lake in Nevada. So Groom Lake still exists. And on the earlier versions, if you go to Groom Lake, you can still do this. They took it out completely on the version I have, so I can't show you that. But that was another example of the government getting in the way of fun. And then someone asked me if I ever met Steve Jobs. Actually, I met him a number of times. I've not met him personally, but like there's one time I was coming out of the building, and he was walking in. I noticed he didn't have a badge. And I was thinking, I wonder if I should open up the door and say, show me your badge. But that's what we call a CLM, which is a career limiting move. So I didn't do that. But another day, a little bit of background is the cafeterias in Silicon Valley are not run by the companies themselves. They're contracted out. And Adobe has one like that, and Apple has one like that. And one day I was in the cafeteria, and they have a sort of the design your own pizza kind of thing, where the guy puts the pizza together for you, throws it in a pizza oven, and then 5 minutes later pulls it out. And Steve Jobs was in line. He was actually right in front of me in line. And he was talking to some guy, blah, blah, blah. And then he got up to the front of the line, and the guy said, what kind of pizza do you want? And Steve Jobs started describing something like this: tomatoes, olives, peppers. But this guy always took a pre-made pizza thing, and he threw cheese on it, and he kept going from there. Steve Jobs looked down and very sternly said, did I say cheese? And the guy said, no, sorry, sir. And then he threw that one out and started over to the pizza. Well, I thought, that's Steve Jobs. But then the next week, they have company announcements each week. The next week, they sent out a notice saying that they're going to have a new company running the cafeteria. And I don't know if it's coincidence, but but Steve Jobs didn't like his pizza. And the next week, it was a new company running the cafeteria. So, and then another thing that Steve Jobs didn't like is that Newton wasn't his idea, and he didn't like it. So when he came back to the company, he said, well, no more Newton, and he shut it down. So they didn't I wasn't told to leave. They were going to find me, but they said, well, I could go to other areas. But I just decided to go to a different company. Does anyone know who this guy is? No. I don't know any of these guys. This is Jeff Hawkins, who's not related to the other guy named, did I ever say who the other guy was? Trip Hawkins? Well, they're not related. But this is Jeff Hawkins, and I worked with him back at Grid earlier when there was the pen-based device. And then later on, he went and started his own company, which is Palm. And I guess I could just pass these out. So there's a whole pile of them here. I think it'll work. Well, I can show you. Here, I'll go. This is one of this is one of the earliest ones, which I don't have. And then I think this one came next. There's this device here. This one's kind of cool, and it's a clear case, so you can see the stuff inside of it. And this one turns on down there. Oh, look, it's not even coming on. Oh, there, now it's on. And one of the things I worked on these earlier devices is called infrared communications, where you could beam between two devices. So if I go in here, I'll do a new one. If I go in here and say beam memo, and this one's on over here, if I go like this. So this one that beeped over here is because I just sent a little note from here to this, from this one to this one. I know these days people show they show phones where you tap them and stuff like that. Well, anyway, this was done 10 or 15 years ago, and the cool thing about this, and I don't know if any of the non-Apple phones do this, but is you could share apps with these also, because all the Apple apps you have to always go to the store. But this is a good way to get the apps. You have a simple version, and you can upgrade to the more advanced ones. So, pass these. Oh, and then later on, we've got color ones. Ooh. Where you can see them in the dark, color ones. And these are other cheaper color ones. I got these for my kids. Which that's if you're wondering why they're scratched and look like they've been chewed on. But you can try beaming things to each other. Oh, and I'll show one more thing. Here, I'll just keep this one for a while. And one other thing that's different about these is for the handwriting. To do the handwriting input, there's an area on the bottom that's reserved for that. And it was a simpler way of doing things, so the handwriting was more accurate. Get things working better. And this is one of the things I worked on. It's a thing called PACE. Is the early versions of these worked with the older processor, and then at one point the cell phone manufacturer said, "Well, we'd like to combine a cell phone with what the personal digital assistant, the PDA." But they said, "You're using the wrong processor. Can you switch to a different processor?" And they said, "Well, we'll put both processors in there." And I was working on the team that was switching over, rebuilding everything in one processor. I said, well, there must be a way to get this working. So I spent a weekend and actually took a 68K manual that has all the instructions in the back and went through and looked at them. I said, this can't be that hard. And just in a weekend, wrote a simple emulator, and I emulated the parking lot game. I don't know if you've seen that game where you park cars. And got that working. That's what this was. It's a way to emulate. And it let them keep running the old apps if someone bought the apps on the newer devices. There's one more. Okay, now it's intermission. We're not done yet. This is just intermission. So I kind of think of this as intermission because all the companies I worked for before this time were companies that built both hardware and software. HP and Grid and all these different companies. And then the company I worked for after is Adobe, and Adobe only does software only. But someone said, well, isn't there something common between all of those? And I said, yeah, something common between all those is my wife's brownies. So I brought some brownies today. So for intermission, we have some brownies here, so you can see what it's like to work in Silicon Valley. And if they were burned, like completely burned, and you still ate them, I'd know you're a hardware guy. Like the folks who worked in hardware, they would eat a burned brownie. Because once my wife burned a batch, I said, no, it's okay. The hardware guys will eat these. But if you like just these brownies, which aren't burnt, then they'll be fine. They're softer. So I noticed that there's no eating in this room, but, well, rules are rules. Rules are meant to be broken, right? So you can, you can pass those around. So you can pass these around, eat these, and try beaming things and keep playing around with those things. Yeah. So there is more. Maybe I'll wait till all these guys eat their brownies or something. Oh, and I wanted to mention that for you folks who are looking at this later on the internet and didn't come here today, well, too bad you didn't get any brownies. So maybe next time you'll show up. So, the chocolate chips. Yeah, if you don't like chocolate, just, pass. These are chocolate brownies, if you want to know what we call them. So, okay. So does anybody know who these guys are? Yeah. This is John Warnock and Chuck Juski. I'll have one afterwards. Or someone else will eat them. And that's where I've been working for the last 8 years. Almost exactly 8 years. And they're starting to send lots of emails at work. Or each week they send us kind of like what's going on with the company. And there's this thing called 30 at 30. And I'm not sure what I know the 30 is 30 years. I forgot what the first 30 is for. But they're having a party where people are supposed to dress up in 80s style clothes. Sounds like the biggest mistake. And they have examples like you could dress like Michael Jackson, and they go from there. But yeah. Anyway, at Adobe, I've been working on the Acrobat team. And I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but if you go to help, and then there's a thing that says, I think it says credits. And yeah. So you see that scroll bar up there, and you see how small it is? This thing goes on forever. It's like 10 pages of names. But I guess that's the advantage of working in engineering. Your name's at the top, and having the last name that's near the end of the alphabet. I'm sort of near the beginning. But when I got on the first one, it's like it was cool to show my parents. But after that, it's like kind of like whatever. But kind of cool. And then, has anyone ever seen this before? If you haven't, I figure you live on a different planet if you haven't. But this is the one of the many updater notices, and this is one of the first things I worked on, because, when you first start somewhere, you have to start at the bottom. But I like to refer to this as, like, your mom always tells you to eat your vegetables, so you stay healthy and strong. Well, this is Adobe's way of saying, well, you want to get updates so both your app and your computer stay healthy and strong, because after a while, the hackers discovered that they've hacked PCs enough, and they said, what's the next thing we can hack? And they discovered there's a lot of PDFs out there, and are there ways we can hack those? And there's simple ways of hacking things in the sense that if you can cause the app to crash and get the right thing in there, you can take over. And we had kind of a security class where they showed us things that you could do. It was pretty amazing what you could do. But every time something like that's discovered, an update comes out. There's also their quarterly updates, which have new features or little bug fixes, but there's also security. So I know it shows up all the time. It's annoying, but there's a reason behind it. And then has anyone seen this? This you'd only see if you are running Acrobat but not Reader. This is the Adobe Product Improvement Program. And the code name, when I was writing this, I thought it was funny. The code name is Headlights. And I thought, well, that sounds like head lice. And I think, that's not good. But the headlights refers to that there are a lot of people using Acrobat, but the product marketing folks they couldn't see through the fog. They really didn't know exactly how it was being used, which menus people used. And what we did is we added things throughout the program to whenever you went to certain menus or probably any menu. And this is voluntary. Like the first thing says, the default is no, I don't want to do this. But we collect information and it sends it back to Adobe or to the Acrobat team. And then they just consolidate it. And they can say, well, look, a lot of people are using this feature. No one's using this feature. So like it helps them prioritize things. Or if it's a feature that they know people like when they find it, they say, why aren't people finding it? And then they redesign the UI and stuff like that. So that's what that was. For 1 year, I worked in a team in San Francisco, which actually wasn't Acrobat related. It was a Flash mobile team, because a couple of years before that, Macromedia was acquired by Adobe, and I knew a couple of guys working on this who I'd also worked with at 3DO and some other companies. Like you keep running around across the same people, and this particular phone, I don't know if anyone had a Crazer phone. It's not a dumb phone, and it's not a smartphone. This before Android existed, but they still wanted to have Flash on the phones. So there was something called Flashcast, which was a way of putting Flash onto a phone, and they could send information to the phone, and then once it received on the phone, display it through Flash. And after that, I came back to the Acrobat team, worked on Acrobat portfolios. And Acrobat portfolios are kind of like zip files, but stored inside a PDF with a UI and controls. Now, I'll show you a little demo of that in a few seconds. And then more recently, I've been working on Create PDF. And Create PDF, a lot of people find out that I can get them a copy of Acrobat. I think everyone here at least has CS6 or something like that in your class, which has Acrobat in it. But whenever I ask people, like, why do you want Acrobat, they say, oh, because I need to make a PDF. And it does a lot more than that. Believe me, a lot more than that. But usually people want to make Create PDF. Well, there's an online service, and this online service is available also through Reader, which I'll show you a demo of that, and lets you create PDFs or export. Has anyone here heard of export PDF before? It's the inverse, where if you have a PDF, you can convert it back to a doc file or Excel file. And it's kind of funny because recently my wife had mentioned that somebody said, "Oh, I'm making this file into a PDF so people can't change it." It was a report, so that way people can't change it. I'm thinking, like, well, they're not aware of what people can do. And then there's also a standalone browser version of that. And I'll show you a demo of these. Let me hide that one first. Close this. So this is what the portfolio one, I'll show you briefly what that looks like. This is a portfolio it's a fake one that was just created by the product marketing team. But when you open up the PDF file, it has this getting started pages, and it's basically saying, oh, this could be used for a new employee. And if you do get started, I guess some of this is off the screen there, but it lets you go between the different files so you can peruse them like this. This one is called Carousel. And then you can also, let's see. And so it's very personal. You know, the guy sends you one of these, never talks to you. Just kidding. But oh, look at this. They want me to do something. No, I don't. But then you can go between the different files, and like this is for your direct deposit, and this is non-disclosure. Standard stuff like that. So that's what a portfolio is like. Or what? Hey, stop it. Now, open recent file. This little fictitious demo, as you can see, I live on Sesame Street. This is sort of close to reality. Is a while back I created my resume and then I created a PDF for it, and I was like, oh no, I don't have the original doc file. What can I do? So using tools here, the default is export PDF. This might make me sign in again. Yeah, it does. Silly security people. Sign in. So it's cut off a little bit over there. But what it does is what it's doing is uploading that to the server, which actually is, it uploads it to one server, and then it sends it to another server, which is specific to the export function, and then it sends it back. And then here it says, okay, save the file. So say, okay, I want to save this file in here. And then if I go down, then if I say, okay, I'm going to update this, try to make this quick, and we'll just say it's Adobe. Save it, quit. And then another way you can do this is from the browser. This is what the interface looks like. This one also might make, it's probably going to make me, I bet it's going to make me log in again. Let's see. Nope. There's a timeout period that you have to log in again. But in this one, I can do convert a file because, and then I can take my updated resume and open that. And that uploads it. And it's doing the same thing with just different UI. And it's converting it. This one sends it to a different set of servers which do conversions. There's actually a different set of servers for each file type. We have some, there's as many as 3,000 conversions a day, I think, for some file types. And then you hope it works. Okay, so there it's done. And then you can download it. And, oh, I have to do this to open it. And there's, back in Reader, that's my new version that now says Adobe. So I kind of went in a cycle. So, let's go back over here. And then I only have 2 more slides, which someone might say, well, what does a software engineer do? And basically, these are the steps of what we do over and over and over, like little robots. But we design and document the things we're working on, implement and test, and then someone in QE says you did it wrong, and you go back and implement, refix it, fix the bugs, and then do that. And hopefully we have time to learn new things and experiment. A lot of times I'll do things on my own, experimenting with things. And then what do I like about being a software engineer are these things: challenging work, flexible hours, working from home, or for 1 year I worked in a different country. And then wearing whatever I want. I don't like dressing up. And then minimum number of meetings. It's kind of like those 2 items means I don't want to be a manager. And then riding my bike to work and donuts. Almost the most important thing. And that's it. So if you have any questions, I can answer questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
That guy does.
Yeah. Surprising no one asked. Hi, Tim. We read a book by Kevin Kelly in one of our other courses called What Technology Wants. And a concept he kind of touched upon was like the inevitability of certain technologies. And he specifically referred to how in the World's Fair in 1964 they had video phones kind of on display. And he said, well, inevitably video phones are going to come about. And looking at a lot of different projects you've worked on, and this idea of like the writing and the touchscreen applications, based on your experience in your career, did you see tablet computing and like the iPad or the Android as being something inevitably that consumer computing sphere was going to move into, as opposed to just kind of the laptop or desktop computer?
I don't know if I saw that it would be eventually. And just looking in retrospect, looking back, or looking at the way things are now, I think there were a lot of pieces that were missing in the past. And one of the big pieces is that, one of the pieces really early on was having apps that would be written for and Newton did that, but it didn't catch on much. Palm had a pretty good app infrastructure. And another missing piece throughout that time was how to actually share things, which having the internet more in place and having something like a common place like a store based off the internet is a missing piece. So I can't say that I was just going from company to company, following other people I worked with and working on cool things. Like I said, I was working for the visionaries. I wasn't the visionary.
Jan, you had a question?
What is your personal new media vision, and what you want to work for in the next 5 years or 10 years?
Say, who do I want to work for?
Yeah.
I'll keep working for Adobe.
What is your personal new media vision in the next years?
My new media vision. No, this is Silicon Valley Visionaries that you want to know about.
Okay.
Vision. Do you ask everybody this question? See, I never watched any. I watched a few at the beginning of some of the other ones. I should have watched the whole thing so I knew how to answer the questions at the end. But
after you're working on Acrobat, right? Reader and in Adobe, but in specifically the PDF creation and everything. Do you want to move to somewhere else, like I don't know, the creative stuff or Flash, Flash is going to be out soon. The new thing that you guys are going to have after Flash, or do you want to stay where you are?
I might. Well, it may not have been obvious, but the what's that thing called? Over here. The portfolios, that actually was Flash based. So we did a lot of stuff with Flash as far as learning about Flash. Flash currently, and then Create PDF, the first version was Flash. This version is, the version that I just showed you is all HTML5. So it's kind of like Flash went like this, and now it's going like this. So for specifics, that wouldn't be something that would be a new thing to work on. But when new things come up, I might work on them. But I haven't, pretty much most of the other folks I work with are in the Acrobat team. I haven't worked in Photoshop, things like that. There's some of the other areas that Acrobat has gone into is a mobile. There are mobile versions of Reader and things like that. But I chose to stick with sort of exploring the internet version of this thing.
So this is not exactly a high-tech new media Silicon Valley visionary. What movie were you going to see tonight?
I didn't see the email. There's related to that. The other guy who picks the movies, his name's Movie Mike, and he doesn't have a car. Usually doesn't. I'm Taxi Tim. So if you ever see a electric leaf on the street that says Taxi Tim on the license plate, you'll know that's my car. But my wife will be driving it because she's usually driving it because I ride my bike. So I'll have to get back to you which movie it was.
One of the missions of this class is to introduce our students to people who are in various stages of developing things, whether it's an entrepreneur with the idea or the VC guy with the money. You bring something so original and so unique. It's almost like poetry in a way. I mean, you literally...
Brownies, you mean?
Yeah, well, I like the brownies. Don't get me wrong. But, no, the one vision of the developer, the software engineer, is the person who sleeps under desks with Mountain Dew cans all over the place and, consecutive all-nighters. I mean, I just think of the early days of Apple. You lived that a bit, I assume. How is it now? What's it like now? Is there still that kind of, is that still happening?
For me specifically, or?
I mean, I probably,
well,
yeah.
Like some of this is what you would think, I think it still happens, but I think depending on the age of the person. Like when we didn't have kids and I was younger, and there's just my wife and me, and she was also working in the early years. She was working at Apple, actually, in the county department, yeah. But so we were both busy doing things. So working long hours and doing things with other single people was kind of like really normal. And then after a while, you get kids and you move into a different lifestyle. And I would sort of shift things where, and a lot of people I know who have kids who are even younger when they get kids, they have a lifestyle of you do things with your kids and you put the younger kids to bed at 8 o'clock, and they're like, then from 9 to 11 they're back on the computer doing work things, catching up, or early in the morning they're doing things. So it's sort of I think the lifestyle that you're describing still exists, but it follows the age of the person, and somewhat follows the companies too. I hear jokes about at Google where, well, they give you free meals and they also give you a nice free bed here, and as long as you stay here 24 hours, it's all free.
Well, one follow-up to that is that, many of the students in this class also are in another class where they're creating apps and ebooks and doing interactive work. And the structure is such that we have somebody who's sort of managing the design side, somebody managing the development side, and there's a project manager on top of that who kind of makes sure that bills are paid and things are delivered on time. Is that a realistic model, do you think, in the real world? Something like that. I mean, the way I've heard it about the designers talking to the developer is the designers wave their arms and flap their gums and then hand them a wireframe and then they say, "Okay, here's what's possible." The developer says, "Here's what's possible."
Yeah.
So yeah.
For the portfolio project, it was more like that you just described. But for the Create PDF project, because CSS, I don't know if you've done things with CSS and HTML, the designer actually does all these things live, but the back end's not there. So all of that stuff that was on the browser, the designer does most of that first off and comes up with it. So they're more like a developer, but so they're more than just drawing, this is how I want to do it, but would do it. And then that same code would get merged with our code, and then we would fill in the back end. And then over time, we would take it and modify what they do. And if we figure out something doesn't work on some evil browser like Internet Explorer, we would send it back to the designers and say, can you figure out how the heck to make this work on this thing? So it works both ways. But and there's product marketing folks who are the ones that are maybe more pie in the sky. We want to do it this way, and then we'll tell them we can. This is how long it takes, and the trade-offs.
Can I just follow up without a microphone? How much coding do you think a designer should know, or a project manager should know? How deep how well versed in, say, at least CSS and HTML5 and
For a designer.
mobile app languages? What would you say?
Well, I think there could be different types of designers. There could be ones who are saying this is the way I envision it. And a lot of times they will just show a bunch of slides and they'll mock it up with other programs that have nothing to do with reality. Then there's the next level, the guy who knows how to do it. So it could be either one. If someone's a manager, I've been lucky. Most of my managers have been technical. They've worked their ways up. I respect those guys. I haven't had any Dilbert managers, the pointy-haired boss guys. But those kind of guys where they're just trying to explain it, but they don't understand what you're doing, to me, that's not very useful. But.
Okay. I know in recent years, Apple and Adobe have kind of had this love-hate relationship going on. Can you talk? I see that you have an Apple product that you use, but can you talk more about that love-hate relationship that's been going on over the last couple of years?
Let me check with the lawyers. That's what I should say. Well, when I know one of the things that happened about 2 years ago, maybe, is when Steve Jobs posted the letter on the Apple.com page saying that Flash is crummy and that kind of thing. But at the same time, there was a developers conference that had really, really funny parody. It was based on Sesame Street, and they had two little puppets. And the two little puppets were being interviewed by a mock newscaster, and one little puppet was named Flashy. I think another one's called HTML5. And they were getting along really great. They were really fun. And then they interviewed them separately. That guy, I hate that guy. And they say, there's a guy, he stinks. He can't be as good as me. But it was sort of a joke. But at the same time, Adobe was working with on HTML5, and about a year after that, they were releasing products, and we're using HTML5. And it's kind of like there's some Steve Jobs, a little bit harsh, and like it's completely useless. And Flash is still used in a lot of things, but in certain areas, we're trying to use it less. And we realize HTML5 is becoming standard now. I don't know if that answers your question, but
one more is as far as developers go, how competitive do you guys feel towards other companies like Microsoft and other companies that do similar stuff to what you guys do?
I guess that's another love-hate relationship, because when I showed this demo, the thing that I converted was a doc file, right? So we can convert doc files and Excel files and things like that. Well, if you go all the way to the other end of the server in the back end, we're using Microsoft products to do that, along with Acrobat. If you have Acrobat, you can do that with Acrobat. You don't need this online version. This is sort of for a different, if you own Acrobat, you don't need this. So we still work with them, and I guess I don't have any opinion other than that.
Any other questions? Oh, okay.
Okay.
As an engineer, maybe you have to keep up with the latest technology all the time, but you're working 24 hours. And how do you keep up with the latest technology? Are you learning by yourself, or does the company offer the opportunity to learn?
Usually I'm learning by myself. Like even with the there's something called Flash Builder, which lets you build an Air app. I don't know if you've ever heard of Air apps, but it's where you can have Flash running an app standalone besides being on a browser. And I'll just come up with some need for that. And my son was not doing very well in math, so I created a little thing which is like flashcards, where he had to answer the questions. And we'd say, okay, you have to sit there and you have to go through all this multiplication and division problems, and I wrote a little app to do that. So I had to use the environment to figure out how to do it. And then recently, this is Vicky, this is Camille's mother, and she's a secretary at our church, and she used to copy and paste web pages to get Bible verses that are displayed at our church. And she would always leave the numbers in there, because on the web pages it would have the numbers, but we didn't want it that way. I said, there's got to be an easier way to do this. So I figured out how to write an app and go to the web page, pull down the content, parse the whole thing, format it the way it had to be for this other program, and write it out. So to do that, I wouldn't say I forced myself. I took the opportunity of saying, okay, now I can learn how to communicate, run these commands, because I really hadn't done much with web stuff before. But then when there's opportunity to work in the group doing Create PDF, I had this background, and it's pretty easy to move use that knowledge. So I'm not very good about, some people are pretty good about picking up a book and reading all about it. That to me is too boring. It's more fun hands-on to do something and kind of come up with a reason. And I'm trying to take some of these apps I've written with Flash and convert them over to be a combination of, and recently, I have this really demented idea of vacations. I took the last 5 days off around Thanksgiving, and I went to Google Apps. You can go to Google Apps and create your own little website, and I put some stuff up on there, and I started converting some things that I had instead of going to Hawaii or something. But it's another example of learning things.
I'll say another thing he does, because at our church, what we do is the software that we use, company out, went out of business. So
fixing what the editor produces so it works. But yeah, whatever. That's a common response. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, whatever.
When you're working on a big project like Acrobat, you know, there's obviously a lot of features, and you kind of mentioned that you built that application to get user data back. How do you decide what's the best way to spend your time or your resources? Like, well, this is a feature we really want to put a lot of thought into because, you know, like you said, the designers will come and you say, well, this is how long it's going to take. I mean, what's the decision process, in your team at least, for, all right, this is a feature we really feel like we want to pursue?
For the current team I'm on, as an example, so I'll give you another example. I mean, another background thing is that Acrobat, we would produce a new version of Acrobat in a year and a half, roughly. So it'd be a year and a half. So it'd be a long time, and they would say, well, how many things are we going to fit in here? And there would be people going through this list. They had a backlog list of multiple thousands of items that was always getting bigger. And managers would prioritize that, and product marketing would prioritize it. And now, with Create PDF, we release something new every 2 weeks, or bug fixes every 2 weeks, because it's online, and just a new version is there, and people don't even realize it's new, because it's the server software mostly that's changing. And in those cases, it's pretty easy to just say, well, what's something that people have been asking for, and is it very difficult to do? There's something that I added in that my manager said, can you find out how difficult this is to do? Keeping it just so this doesn't sound like wow, like I could do everything. The back end was already there, and I said, well, he said, why don't you see how long it takes to do this? So after lunch, I worked on it, and at 2 o'clock, I said, okay, it's done, because I just had to add a few entries, because it's just another variation of the export or to create items. There's a list of items you can do. It's just adding one and sending it through, and the software was designed pretty easily. So that's the kind of thing they'll say, okay, well, we want to put that in there because it's easy to do. Some of the other things, like they're changing the UI, the way that it looks overall. The first version actually matches the old UI of the whole. There was like an old product, and then this is the new product we worked on. They both look almost identical. One's Flash-based, one's HTML5 based. But like one of the next things they're doing is changing the UI. That's a little bit more work to that, but they wanted to do that. So those are examples, but maybe I'm not answering the specific question. But it's mostly the product marketing folks who are the ones who prioritize what they want to have next. And it's pretty easy to say, well, you might not get it in 2 weeks, but maybe you'll get it in a month. Where with Acrobat, it's more important for them to get it into the cycle. If it's a year and a half, they have to really decide what do they want to do. And Acrobat, because of that headlights program, they have a better idea of what kind of things people are using or not using. And actually, there's two other things that are used for the web-based version that we have here. One is what's it called? It's called Site Catalyst Analytics. It's a company called Omniture that Adobe bought, and that will just let them know what web pages are people going to, or if, like, did they go a certain path down web pages and then change their mind. That gives them an idea of, well, how can they change things at that level. And another thing we do is whenever there are problems, we log errors into a log file. And there's a company called Splunk, and that company will let you look through zillions of log files and give you graphs and pictures of kind of things that people are using. So one time we were trying to decide, adding in a new feature I mentioned earlier, it kind of fit. We said, where do you want this in the list of items? And I wasn't clear enough, and I sent it out. They sent it out to product marketing. Each one said they wanted a different place. And they said, and by the way, I want this thing moved down there and this thing over here. And I said, well, you sure you want to do that? And then one guy who was the smartest guy of the group, he said, well, why don't you look in your logs and find out which one's used the most? Because we have the data. And we found out that DocX was used the most. So we said, okay, we're going to keep that at the top. Because if you move that down, people are already using it the most, so why would you move it down? Someone else wanted to move it down. So that's another tool that's used. It's not just, we're using tools that are capturing real usage and not just the imagination of some product marketing guy who thinks that's the way it should be.
Any other questions? All right, so everybody, let's give our speaker a round of applause.
So,